Well, thank you so much, Arlene, for leading us in that time. And I hope that it was able to breathe some life into some of you this morning. So before we go into our message for today, there's some things that I want to talk about in regards to some national events this week. As you know, here at Icon, we know that it's important to continue to bring awareness and to talk about things going on in our world and the ways in which it's affecting our neighbors and people that we love and other human beings. And so I'm sure, as all of you are aware, this past week, yet again, we find ourselves mourning the loss of two individuals who were shot and killed by law enforcement. We have Dante Wright, who is a black man who was killed, and then Adam Toledo, who was a Latino little 13-year-old boy who was shot and killed by police this week. And church, we have to continue to talk about these things, and we have to continue to mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve, and continue to do our part in this fight that we find ourselves in against racism and white supremacy and violence and these things that are literally tearing people and families in our world apart. And so I just want to, we're going to take a second here in a moment, and we are going to actually pray about this issue. But before we do that, Catherine Shackleford is a member of our faith community here, and she is doing some really beautiful work, and she's a very gifted writer, and she actually wrote a piece inspired by the events of this week. And so she's actually going to come on live here with us for a couple of moments, and she just has some things that she wants to share, and she's going to share some of her writing with us. And so we're going to go ahead and welcome Catherine. Give us this. We're going to figure this out, make sure we're doing this okay. There's Catherine. Let's make sure our volume is good. Okay.
I probably should unmute myself.
Let's see, can we?
Yep, she is on.
We good? Okay,
right,
you're good.
Ahead.
You're on. We can hear you, and I think we're good. So welcome, Catherine.
Hi, everybody. So in terms of my diversity work and stuff, I started actually volunteering for the Diversity Council last summer, and they asked me to write some articles for their website, just about a lot of different topics: education reform, police brutality, racism, LGBTQIA plus rights as well. And then after that, I basically decided to keep my work, catalog it, and put it on a website. And then I kept writing, especially since last year was extremely traumatic for a lot of people with all of the riots going on and George Floyd. And the trial is actually, I think, still going on right now for Derek Chauvin. So there was a lot of chaos involved with that. And then, of course, as Kelly mentioned this past week, we had the incident with Dante Wright and then Adam. So it was a very heavy diversity week, started writing, and I ended up posting more to the website, and then she wanted me to come share today to let you guys know that it's there as a resource if you'd like to look through it or anything else. So I wrote a little intro to the poem, and then I'll read that, and then if you guys have any, comments, questions, comments in the chat, then, feel free to do whatever. So I wrote Perspective a few days ago after a heavy diversity-centered week and multiple conversations with people about police brutality on Facebook and with friends. Once again, another Black man, Dante Wright, has been murdered by a police officer, and despite video evidence of the killing, it is unlikely that the officer will be punished to the full extent of the law due to qualified immunity and his skin color. Of course, there are a mixture of perspectives on what the community needs to do for police reform, from those who choose to acknowledge the roles that racism and racial profiling play in police interactions with Black, Indigenous people of color. However, there are still willfully ignorant people who choose to remain in denial and pretend that racism and white supremacy don't impact policing. They continue to dig for ways to blame the victims. We can't breathe while we're alive, and we get blamed for our own murders after we're dead. There is no peace, at least not yet. Yes, people should pay for their crimes, but they are still innocent until proven guilty, and should make it into custody safely, like all of the white suspects who get arrested with little more than a scratch, even when they are aiming guns at officers or chasing them with machetes. Somehow they still get to stand in front of a jury, and it's actually composed of their peers. When a Black Indigenous person of color jaywalks, sleeps in their bed, is jogging or walking through their neighborhood, has a phone or Skittles in their hand, is selling loose cigarettes, gets pulled over for a missed turn signal or an air freshener on their rearview mirror, they can easily lose their life and often do. A raised voice or move of a hand, and suddenly their life becomes worthless. Narratives about people of color being more aggressive, savage, dangerous, and less human that date back to colonialism and slavery, designed to relieve slave owners of their guilt, are still a part of our cultural makeup. And unfortunately, these falsehoods impact the way police officers treat non-white citizens. Their unexamined biases are literally killing us. Thankfully, social media and video evidence have made the differences between the treatment of white people and people of color visible. Now everyone can see the horrible abuse and mistreatment occurring. As Will Smith said, racism isn't getting worse, it's just getting filmed. However, many still look for the smallest reason to blame the victims. Many white people don't intend to perpetuate the racist treatment by making excuses for the officers, but their lack of personal experience with being victimized by authority colors their perspective. They have always been treated with the privilege that their skin color affords them. So there must be another reason why that Black man died, right? They can't make a decision regarding how they feel about a video of a 13-year-old being shot or a Black woman being punched in the face by a man twice her size after she was already handcuffed because they don't have all the facts. I guess it depends on your life experiences and willingness to listen to other people's perspectives. So the poem is called Perspective, and I'm just going to go ahead and read through that. White people see safety. The safety on the gun is securely engaged. Black people see eyes filled with fear and a shaking hand. The safety is off and the officer is gripping his gun. White people see respect and concern. Sorry to bother you, sir. I just wanted to make sure you got your taillight fixed. Black people see suspicion and condescension. Do you know why I pulled you over? Are there any weapons or drugs in your car? Do you own this nice car? White people see heroes who work to protect their neighborhoods. Thank you for keeping us safe. Black people see bullies with badges who harass their friends and family. Is this your house? Do you live in this neighborhood? White people don't see racial profiling or racism when a Black person gets executed. Oh, I need to hear more facts before I can say it was murder, even though the video shows the killing on tape. He was holding a gun like a gangster in the photo, so his mindset got him killed. Black people see another Black body in the street who could have been their father, mother, sister, brother, friend for them. He was just holding his phone. She was asleep in her bed. White people see cops as saviors. Black people see them as remnants of the slave patrol with the legal power and qualified immunity to make sure they get away with public New Age lynchings. It's all about perspective. And that's it.
Oh, Kat, thank you. Thank you for the labor that you put into that, especially during a very difficult week. Thank you for sharing that with us. You know, for those of us watching today who are white, some of those things probably felt uncomfortable and difficult to hear, and that's a good thing. And we need to sit in that, and we need to listen to and believe the lived experiences of our Black neighbors. So just thank you. That I just, I'm so grateful for that. And here's what else we're going to do. Kat has a lot of writings on her website that are really, really thought-provoking and beautiful, and just very, very well written, and they make you think and are so gracious. And so Amanda is going to throw the link to Kat's website and to her work in the chat. And here's what I would love for us to do today as a church, as part of Kat's church family. There is a place on her website where you can go and leave a tip. And so I want to encourage all of us today, even if it's $1, if it's $5, whatever it is that you can do, I would love for as many of us as possibly can to go onto her site today and to leave her a tip and to pay her for her labor and for her work, and to use our resources to help lift her up and to help try to alleviate. For those of us who are white, we don't know what it's like to live in the body of a person of color. We don't know what it's like to walk through their experiences, and these kinds of things. Every time there's another shooting, it takes its toll and it re-traumatizes. And so, Kat, we love you and we stand with you, and we want to do whatever we can to breathe life into you and to support your work and to help alleviate, even if it's just a little tiny bit of stress. Like, we want to be able to help do that for you this morning. So thank you so much for hopping on, being willing to do that, and for sharing your work with us this morning.
Well, thank you for, going through and reading it. And honestly, I never planned on really sharing it that much, but I'm just glad that someone finds it meaningful and useful, and that you guys are really, you're also amazing, of course, you're super supportive, but yeah. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Appreciate that.
We love you. Thank you. Oh, okay. So, that was just, really great. And I love to be able to have resources that are available to us to be able to learn and to listen and to help us to seek to understand, what other people are going through. And also, in addition to Kat's website, I also spoke with Christine Stivers the other day, and she passed off some really great organizations and resources when it comes to supporting the Latinx community and our Latino and Latinx neighbors. And so Amanda's also going to throw these links in the chat. These are just some organizations that we can link arms with and be able to donate to and to try to help in any way that we can. The first one is called This Is About Humanity. And this organization works to raise awareness about separated and reunified families and vulnerable communities on both sides of the United States and Mexico border. And the link that we're putting in the chat, it's an Amazon link for things to purchase for the wish list for this group to help serve these communities. The second one is called Impact Austin. Impact Austin is an Austin-based women's collective organization that funds Central Texas nonprofits that provide services in Bastrop, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson counties. Our membership and leadership proudly reflect the many faces, cultures, and walks of life that make up our society. We believe diversity helps us to better understand and address the issues facing our community. So Impact Austin is an organization that you can click on that link to get more information as for other ways that you can get involved. And then the Immigration Coalition is another one, and they provide clean drinking water to Latino immigrant and migrant communities along the southern border and in Latin America. And so we're going to post that link as well, that you can give towards that to help just simply provide clean water to these migrant families as they are, coming to the border and seeking safety. And so those are just, a few things that we can do to help. And I would also add that for us to be mindful, to pay attention to what's happening in our world, to understand how when things like this happen, that it isn't, this trauma and the suffering and pain isn't only limited to the people who are directly influenced, but it affects our Black and brown siblings as well. And so, reach out to your Black and brown friends. Reach out and provide words of encouragement, provide support. Let's just care for one another really well. Let's make an effort to do that. As things like this happen in our world, we just want to come alongside our Black and brown siblings and offer support in whatever way that we can. So thank you guys for understanding that today's a little bit kind of disjointed. It's not like this perfectly flowing, morning, but I just think these things are important. And thank you for the ways in which you are supporting CAT and supporting these organizations. And I really believe that as a church that it's important that we do our part to continue to make our world more healthy and whole, and where there's wholeness and shalom for everyone. So okay, so we're going to go ahead and not so gracefully transition into this morning's message. And I'm looking at the time going, okay, I'm going to have to kind of fly through some of these things. But today we're going to talk about James chapter 3 and the power of our words. And there are going to be some ways that I'm going to kind of tie everything together today. And we called today Sticks and Stones. Amanda actually came up with that, and I thought that was I was like, oh, I love that. That's so brilliant. I think that works out perfectly. But we've all heard, the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, or names will never hurt me, or, however it goes. But I think we all know that this couldn't be further from the truth. We all know that our words have a huge capacity and are extremely powerful. And when we look at the book of James chapter 3, we can see James giving us this picture in this writing of just how powerful our words can be. And so you can either just listen along, or you can get out your Bibles or your Bible app and follow along with these scriptures. In James 3 verse 1, it says, "My brothers and sisters, I do not encourage a large number of you to become teachers, because teachers will be held to a higher standard." And so I think that's interesting that he starts the chapter off this way, that reminding those of us who are called to teach are held to a higher standard, because the words that we choose to speak have such a great impact. And so I want to be clear from the get-go that everything I'm speaking to you today, and honestly every single time I get up here and preach, every time Sabrina does, or Amanda, or whoever it is that gets up here and preaches, we are not saying that we have it all figured out. Okay, we are preaching to ourselves just as much as we are to all of you watching. These sermons that we give are a communal call to living like Jesus, and that includes the one who's delivering the message. And then James 3:2, he goes on to say, "We all stumble along the way. If a person never speaks hurtful words or shouts in anger or profanity, then he has achieved perfection. The one who controls his tongue controls the rest of his body." And I love that he included this part in here, that reminding us that, listen, we are all going to stumble, that there is room for grace, there is room for growth. He's right off the bat reminding the reader that we are all going to fail, and that none of us are exempt from causing harm with our words. And I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of the passage to you. James 3:4-10. "It's like when we place a metal bit into a horse's mouth to ride it. We can control its entire body with the slightest movement of our hand. Have you ever seen a massive ship sailing effortlessly across the water? Despite its immense size and the fact that it is propelled by mighty winds, a small rudder directs the ship in any direction the pilot chooses. It's just the same with our tongues. It's a small, awkward muscle capable of marvelous undertakings. But do you know how many forest fires begin with a single ember from a small campfire? The tongue is a blazing fire seeking to ignite an entire world of vices. The tongue is unique among all parts of the body because it is capable of corrupting the whole body. If that were not enough, it ignites and consumes the course of creation with a fuel that originates in hell itself. Humanity is capable of taming every bird and beast in existence, even reptiles and sea creatures great and small, but no man has ever demonstrated the ability to tame his own tongue. It is a spring of restless evil, brimming with toxic poisons. Ironically, this instrument can be both an instrument of blessing to our Lord and Father and a weapon that hurls curses upon others who are created in God's own image. One mouth streams forth both blessings and curses. This is not how it should be. So when we read this, it's clear that James is not mincing words. He's using some very strong language and obviously feels very strongly about the importance of the words that we say. And beyond that, the impact that our speech can have both on ourselves and on others. I mean, think about this picture of a bit guiding a horse. You know, my oldest daughter rides horses, and every time she gets on a horse and I watch her, you know, this small girl controlling this large animal just with the reins that she's holding that are attached to a bit that fits right inside the horse's mouth. It just amazes me every time. Or think about the picture of a ship that James gives us here. The fact that a ship's movement, you know, think of a cruise ship. I mean, just large. Its movement across the water is controlled by a rudder that is a fraction of the size of the ship. And, you know, we all know the illustration he gives of a small spark is all it takes to burn down an entire forest. We've seen this happen. We've seen wildfires. We know that this is how fires start. And in the same way, our tiny little tongue is so powerful. And I know that for me, I've experienced this to be true. And I'm sure you can all relate with your experiences as well. I mean, how many of you can still recall, even years later, a hurtful word that was spoken to you? How many of you, it could have been 10 years ago and you still remember that? And in the same way, how many of you can recall, even years later, a word of encouragement that was spoken over you? I know I can. There have been times that someone has hurt me because of the words that they've spoken, and they just have stuck with me over years. And there have also been times when people have brought so much healing into my life, and that I remember years later. See, a lot of times the words that are spoken over us can actually impact the decisions that we make that affect our actual lives. Our words can either bring life and love and hope, or they can bring fear and hate and death. And the reason for this is because most of the time they aren't just words, right? We know this. We know that the things that we say are more than just a word coming out of our mouth. We can tie what's in our hearts to the way that we choose to use our words. And for me, you know, I think that is what is most damaging, is when someone says something to you that is hurtful, it's because the thought of them actually seeing you that way or believing those things to be true about you are so hurtful. That's what's hurtful. It's not just the word itself. It's what's behind the word. It's what's in the person's heart who is saying the word that can cause so much pain. And now I realize that, you know, we all have the ability to say things in anger that we don't actually mean. I'm not saying that every time we get frustrated and say something that means that we just have so much hate in our heart all the time. I know that we can do that, but here's the thing. We know that when we choose to use our words in a way that hurts someone else, we know the weight of that. We know the weight that our words carry because we feel it. We feel it when it's done to us. We know this weight. And in the same way, when we encourage each other and when we speak life over one another, we do that because we know that our words matter. We know that we have the ability to speak life and hope and love over another person by the way that we choose to use our words. Like James says, our words can either be an instrument of blessing or a weapon that hurls curses. And that is, when I hear that, I'm like, ooh, it's so true that we have the capacity of both of those things, to either speak life or to speak death. And what we speak over both ourselves and what we speak over others matters. And so today I want to talk about both of those things, the importance of both the words we speak over ourselves and the importance of the words that we speak over others. You know, sometimes we can say things about ourselves that we would never say to someone else. We can be our own worst critics, and we can end up causing a lot of harm to ourselves simply because of the things that we speak over ourselves, the things that we tell ourselves, the things that over time, the more we say it to ourselves, we end up believing those things to be true about ourselves. Like it says in James, our tongue can be a restless evil brimming with toxic poisons. We can bring so much toxicity into the ways that we think about ourselves. I think this idea of loving ourselves can be hard for a lot of us. And the thing is, we're taught from a young age by so many voices around us in our culture that we are not enough. We are taught that there are things about us that are wrong, things about us that we need to change. We're taught to compare ourselves to those around us. It's really easy in our culture to see our existence as a competition with other people around us. We're taught to kind of live in this mindset of scarcity, that there isn't enough to go around. And so in order for us to be successful, that means we have to somehow compete with those around us, that there just isn't enough to go around. We're told that our bodies aren't good enough, that we have to achieve more to be worth more. And when we buy into the idea that we aren't enough, we speak things over ourselves that are toxic. And now I'm not saying that we don't have things that we need to work on, because we do. We all know this. We all know that there are ways in which we want to be more whole, ways in which we want to be more healthy, and that we want to treat others with more love. We all have those things. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do certain things in order to be the best version of ourselves. I'm just saying that we need to change the narrative that we aren't loved and that we aren't enough just as we are. Our belovedness is not contingent upon us fixing all of our faults and our flaws. So we need to separate the areas that we want to improve upon from our enoughness and our belovedness. Now, accountability for our actions and for our choices is important, and it matters. Repentance for our sin, it matters. So I'm not saying that we don't recognize those things and work to be better at those things. Part of being healthy and whole is learning to be self-aware and taking ownership for the things that we have said or done that have been hurtful, or for choices we're making or behaviors we're engaging in that we know aren't good for us or for those around us. But even in the things that we want to do better at, and the ways that we want to grow, the ways that we want to improve, the way we talk to ourselves about those things matters. So today, as kind of a question to sit with this first part, as far as the way we speak over ourselves, in what ways do you possibly need to change the way that you speak to yourself? What are some things what's one thing you can do this week to speak life over yourself? To be more attentive and aware of the kinds of things that you are speaking over yourself, because it matters. The way we speak to ourselves, it matters. And it also matters what we speak over others. The words that we speak over others matters. We know this to be true. We've probably all experienced a time when someone else's words have hurt us or caused us harm. We have probably all been the one that has said the hurtful words or caused harm to someone else by the words that we've said. We know that the words we speak can bring life or death, love or fear, hope or despair. And the words that we speak can lead to hurt feelings and to broken relationships. Sometimes we can be cutting with our words, and we can say things to one another that have a lasting impact. It's easy to let words fly when we're angry or when a conversation gets tense and heated, and we all know that once something is spoken, we can't unspeak it. And none of us are exempt from this. This is why James says we will all stumble along the way. We will all stumble along the way. And because of this, because we are all prone to it, we have to be vigilant in guarding the things that we allow to come out of our mouths about other people and to other people. Because you see, language matters. The words that we speak matter, and they matter far more than we are even aware of sometimes. It matters in our personal relationships, and it also matters on a much larger scale as well, as it can affect our community around us. It can affect entire groups of people. And for a lot of us, I would wager that it's easier, now not easy, but easier to refrain from saying hurtful things to the people in our lives who we love and who we care about, those who are closest to us, those who we agree with. It's easier to not say those hurtful things to those people. But when it starts to get more difficult is when it comes to people that we don't know, or people we don't understand, or people we don't agree with. That starts to get tricky, but that matters too. That matters too. The words that we speak, it both matters in our personal relationships and those that we're up close to, but it also matters on a larger scale. Now, I was listening to Brene Brown's podcast recently, and if you don't know who Brene Brown is, she is a researcher and an author who has spent decades studying shame and belonging. And in one of her podcast episodes, and I was going to link it in the chat, and then I totally forgot to get that link going. But if you go on Spotify, you can find Brene Brown's podcast, and she has an episode where she just talks about the power of language, basically the power of our words, and how and also how our language can lead to dehumanization. And when we choose to use words that tear people down or that inflict pain and cause harm, this is a form of dehumanization. And dehumanization is defined as denying a person or a group of people of positive human qualities. It's this way that we kind of reduce someone, especially, we can reduce someone who we disagree with to just their set of beliefs and opinions. We dehumanize them when they do that, when we fail to recognize that they are a whole person. They're not just a set of beliefs, that there is so much more to them than just their opinion about X, Y, or Z issue. And when we reduce someone to just a set of beliefs, we are dehumanizing them. When we say things to ourselves that are harmful, we are dehumanizing ourselves, and we're not seeing ourselves as a whole person who is worthy of love and grace and care. So our words can cause damage in our relationship, and they can also cause harm on a larger scale in the world around us. Words can lead to oppression. Words can stoke fear of people who don't look like you or worship like you or believe like you. Words can lead to dehumanization, and dehumanization always begins with language. It always begins with our words, and it leads to a lack of empathy and to harm and to violence. And I want to say that violence is also not just physical. While we see it happening all the time around us, how the words we speak and the dehumanizing ways that we frame people can lead to actual physical violence and death. But violence is not limited to just physical. Violence can also be psychological. It can be emotional. And Brene Brown also quotes this philosophy professor named Michelle Mays, who says that dehumanizing creates what's called moral exclusion, where you depict a targeted group, a particular group, as less than or less moral than or less right than you. And so then somehow they are no longer under the scope of who is naturally protected by our moral code. It's this idea of sort of looking at a group as other, or demonizing a group that we disagree with, or looking at someone as morally inferior to us. And so therefore what that does in our brains is it sort of gives us this justification and this leeway to be able to say things that maybe we might normally never say about another human being. And we see this happening within all different kinds of marginalized communities. All you have to do is pay attention to people's responses to things that are going on in our world, and you will see this being played out. Like Kat talked about in the beginning, when we see yet another Black person being killed by law enforcement, like what we saw happen to Dante Wright this past week, and then we hear people saying things like, well, they were a criminal, or they were a gangster, or bringing up choices they made from their past. That's dehumanization. We're reducing this whole person with a whole life to the sum of their choice or their choices, and that's dehumanization. Or with Adam Toledo, when people's first response is, well, he shouldn't have been out that late, or, he was hanging out with gang members, or he was part of a gang, so what do you expect? This removes this young 13-year-old little boy's full humanity and reduces him to the sum of his choices, and it dehumanizes. Because when we look at someone as a criminal or just part of a gang, this somehow makes them less human in some way, and then they are excluded from our moral code, and that leads to people looking at what happened to them and finding reasons to justify it. Or maybe it's, you're driving through Austin or San Marcos or whatever city it is that you live in, and you see tents set up that our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness are living in. And when we're grossed out or we're angry about it, or we're upset because we think it makes the city look bad, or we have these thoughts that, man, why don't they just get a job or just pull themselves up by their bootstraps? That is dehumanization. We fail to recognize the full scope and scale of their entire life and their experiences and what they're walking through and what they're going through. When we see immigrants at our borders and we make judgments about them and we fail to see them as human beings deserving of safety and care, and instead our first thought is, well, why don't they just come here legally? That's dehumanization. We aren't seeing them in the whole scope of who they are and their lived experiences. When we see Christians tell LGBTQ people that they're an abomination or that who they are is inherently sinful, we are reducing this person to an issue. We are creating an object out of them, and we are failing to see them as a whole person, and the results are devastating. It is dehumanization. All we have to do is look at the statistics of the pain and trauma and death that is happening in marginalized communities to tell us that our words truly do have the power to either bring life or death. Because dehumanization and violence always starts with language. It always starts with our words. Church, we exist in a world that is full of a lot of beauty and goodness. And we see it everywhere. And we need to gravitate to that and hold on to those things. And there is also so much pain and oppression and death. And it's tempting, especially for those of us who hold more privilege, to want to turn away and not talk about these things and to live in a sort of blissful ignorance. But that is not what we are called to do as followers of Jesus. Jesus purposely walked into the hard places. He walked towards people's pain. He left his privilege behind and sat in the middle of the mess with those who were oppressed. And this is our work too. This is the work of the gospel. And by us saying, you know what, we refuse to speak words that lead to more pain and hurt, and instead we choose to use our words to speak life and truth and hope. This is part of our gospel work in this world. It's part of our gospel work with each other, with our spouses, with our children, with our friends, and it's part of our work in a much larger scale in our community and in our world. The words that we speak about people matter. The stories we tell ourselves about one another matters. Because the way we see people informs the words that we speak about them, and out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And the words we speak about others can either work towards bringing wholeness and empathy and hope in life, or they can work towards dehumanization and lack of love and despair. It matters in our relationships with ourselves, it matters in our relationships with others, and it matters for our world as a whole. And so today, I'm going to wrap it up. Does it cut off at 10:30 or does it cut off at 10:40?
I believe 10:40.
Okay. As we're wrapping up today, just a couple of things to leave you with. In what ways can you use your words and your actions this week to speak life into those around you? In what ways this week can you do that? And then even more specifically than that, how can we use our words and our actions this week to speak life into the lives of our Black and brown friends and neighbors? How can we reach out to those on the margins, to our LGBTQ siblings and to all of our neighbors of color? How can we speak life into people this week? How can we choose to use our words to breathe life and to build up and to edify and to encourage? Church, this is something that it matters. The words we speak, they matter. And so as you go about your week, I want to encourage everyone, even if it's just finding one person that you can encourage, that you can speak life into. Maybe for yourself, you need to like put something up on your bathroom mirror of words of speaking life over yourself to replace those toxic mindsets and the ways that you speak to yourself that just bring you down and cause hurt and pain to yourself. And then purposely seek out people in your life this week, ways that you can choose to use your words to encourage and to edify and to speak life into the people that you come across, the people you're in relationship with, and to our neighbors who so desperately need to see that kind of love and life coming from us. Well, that is all I have. I might take a second here to come into the comments, just because I love doing that. Oh, awesome. Dan put the link to Brene Brown's podcast episode in there, so that's great. Yeah, there's lots of really great, right links that people are posting. Locke and Sabrina said language and dehumanizing language is one of the warning signs of developing hate that can lead to genocide. Locke and Sabrina said, James talks about words in the tongue the way some Christian people talk about sex. Maybe we need tongue purity rings. Okay. That's really great. What am I looking at? This one? Oh, Janine says, Lord, grant me a way to speak more eloquently on social media while at the same time giving me the courage to stop staying silent when it's so incredibly important to speak louder. Yes. Because the answer isn't to just not say anything, like there needs to be accountability and we need to call each other in, but we can do it in a way that isn't dehumanizing. We don't have to dehumanize people we disagree with in our disagreements. Kimmy said, words can be very damaging to relationships. Words can stab just like a dagger. Some people forget that once words leave your mouth, you can't put them back in. Yep, that's so good. Christine said, yes. Those words and headlines are so powerful we don't even realize it sometimes. They are humans. We are humans. We should look and learn about each other. Yes. Just remembering we're all human and seeing every single person in their full humanity. It matters. It's so important. So that is it. Go in peace this week and find ways that you can use your words to speak life and peace into those around you. I love you all so very much, and I will see you right back here next week.